Number 1.
Randy was picked up by Kenton County Police Department officers on August 15, 1980, the night prior to his disappearance. He got into a fistfight with another individual at the Kenton County Fair in Independence, Kentucky, and charged with disorderly conduct and public intoxication. The officers believed he was under the influence of drugs. According to them, Randy struck one of them after he was put in the squad car. The police dropped Randy off approximately 1 mile from his family's home in Visalia, Kentucky. Some reports state that Randy provided unclear directions to his home, and other reports claim that the officers dropped him off at the location as a favor to Randy. He never arrived home that evening and has not been heard from again. Authorities initially believed Randy had drowned. Footprints near the Licking River matched a set of hiking boots owned by one of his relatives, and there were marks indicating someone had slipped and fallen into the water. A search of the river turned up no evidence, however. Investigators now believe the footprints were left by people searching for Randy. Donald Leroy Evans, a former drifter sentenced to death for the murder of a young child in Mississippi, claimed he picked up Randy along Kentucky Route 177, shot him in the head, and buried his body in Kincaid Lake State Park in Pendleton County, Kentucky in 1980. Evans also claimed he was responsible for additional unsolved cases, including the death of Kimberly Dawn McClaskey, who was 17 years old when she disappeared from Illinois in 1983. Her skeletal remains were found in 1989, but not conclusively identified until 2006. Authorities searched Kincaid Lake State Park for Randy's body in 1994, but nothing was located. Evans has never been charged in connection with either case, and police are not sure if he was involved. They called his claims credible, however. He drew a crude but accurate map of the park, and the park is also near to where Randy's mother was visiting a friend the night of his disappearance. His mother believes Randy hitched a ride with Evans to the park in hopes of getting to see her. After receiving additional tips, investigators began conducting fresh searches for Randy in 2006. No clues have been found as of yet, however. Randy's disappearance remains unsolved.
Number 2.
Imbo and her boyfriend, Richard Petrin, were last seen at Abilene's, sometimes spelled Abelines or Obilines, a bar and restaurant in the 400 block of South Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on February 19, 2005. They had drinks with friends at the establishment before leaving between 11:30 and 11:45 p.m. They stated they were going to Imbo's home in Mount Laurel, New Jersey. Neither of them have been heard from again. Their friends stated that both of them behaved normally and seemed happy that evening. Petrin's vehicle is also missing. It's a black and silver 4-door 2001 Dodge Dakota or Dodge Ram pickup truck with the Pennsylvania license plate number YFH2319 and possibly a NASCAR number 99 sticker in the rear window. Photographs of the truck and license plate are posted with this case summary. Neither Imbo nor Petrin have accessed their bank accounts or used their credit cards or EZ-Pass cards since they went missing. Their cellular phones have stayed turned off. Imbo's purse and wallet have not been located. She had an appointment with a hair salon at 11 a.m. the day after she vanished, but never arrived. Petrin and Imbo have one child each. Imbo has a toddler son, and Petrin has a teenage daughter. Their loved ones stated they would never have voluntarily abandoned their families, whom they were close to. The couple knew each other in high school and began dating 10 months before their disappearances, after they separated from their respective partners. Authorities have questioned associates of both people. Petrin and Imbo's estranged husband had allegedly exchanged threats with one another over the telephone, and Imbo had made multiple failed attempts to reconcile with her husband, who was involved with another woman. Shortly before she disappeared, Imbo told her husband and Petrin that she wanted space from both of them. She was reportedly considering ending her relationship with Petrin altogether. Their loved ones believe foul play was involved in their cases, and both families have accused members of the other family of causing their disappearances. Investigators stated that very little evidence is available to indicate what happened to Petrin and Imbo, but they have ruled out kidnapping and think a random act of violence is also unlikely. Their disappearances are being investigated as a double homicide, possibly a murder for hire. Imbo was employed as a loan processor for a mortgage company at the time of her disappearance, working out of her home. She lived on Dunbarton Road in Mount Laurel in southern New Jersey in 2005. Petrin lived in South Philadelphia. Both New Jersey and Pennsylvania authorities are investigating their disappearances, which remain unsolved.
Number 3.
Jeanne resided in a farmhouse near Knox Gallopville Road in Knox, New York. She met her second husband, John Scrima, while she was employed as a restaurant in the New York City borough of the Bronx. Their marriage was troubled by February 1980, and Jeanne planned to file for divorce. She met John Sidney around the same time, and the two began having an affair. Sidney's marriage was ending, and Jeanne told him that she was divorced from her husband. Sidney resided in Schoharie County, New York, and was employed as a General Electric plant designer in Schenectady, New York. Jeanne and Sidney drove to Erie, Pennsylvania on March 17, 1980. They stayed at the Hilton Hotel while Sidney attended to company business. Jeanne told John that she was visiting loved ones in the area. She learned that her husband realized she was having an affair during a phone conversation with her sister on March 18. Jeanne told Sidney that she was still married and needed to return to Knox the following morning. She promised her 4 children that she would be home by the time they returned from school in the afternoon. Jeanne departed from Erie during the morning hours of March 19. She was driving her light blue 1977 Lincoln Continental at the time. The car had the New York license plate number 458LXS. Authorities believe that she arrived at her family's residence in the early afternoon, but her whereabouts after that time period are unknown. Jeanne has never been heard from again. John failed to report his wife's disappearance to authorities. Her attorney filed a missing persons report after he was unable to contact her by May 4, 1980. Sidney cooperated with the investigation and was eliminated as a possible suspect after passing a polygraph exam. John refused to speak with authorities and retained a lawyer shortly after Jeanne's disappearance was reported. He sold the family's farmhouse and relocated to Esperance, New York in 1981. Jeanne's vehicle was spotted in Fultonville, New York, several weeks after she was reported missing. Investigators determined that the car passed through several owners in Ohio before it was discovered abandoned in Michigan on October 5, 1980. No evidence related to Jeanne's case was found inside the vehicle. Authorities said that Jeanne told John about her plans to open a restaurant in Duanesburg, New York, with the money she would receive from the sale of their property after their divorce. Investigators said that they wanted to question John about his wife's case, but all attempts have been unsuccessful. There have not been any arrests in connection with Jeanne's disappearance, which remains unsolved. Foul play is suspected in her case.
Number 4.
Kimberly's husband, Michael Jim Medina, told authorities that his wife was last seen walking to a convenience store in Aurora, Colorado, at approximately 10:30 p.m. on October 29, 1996. The store was located at the corner of Buckley Road and Mississippi Avenue near her family's Tower Road residence. Her husband said Kimberly never arrived home that evening and has not been seen again. He did not report his wife as a missing person until October 31, 1996, 2 days after Kimberly disappeared. Michael stated that Kimberly told him she was going out to buy cigarettes, and he also suspected she walked to the store to place a phone call, although the couple had telephone service inside their residence. He said he believed Kimberly was having an affair with a coworker and had left of her own accord. Kimberly's family told authorities it was extremely uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning. She was employed as a dispatcher at Super Shuttle in the Denver International Airport at the time of her disappearance. Kimberly never retrieved her last paycheck, which was for over $800. She didn't take any personal belongings with her, but her purse has never been located. A police bloodhound tracked Kimberly's scent west on Mississippi Avenue from Tower Road near her home. The trail then led the dog north on Buckley Road, west on East Colfax Avenue, and ended at Interstate 225. The search was called off at that time due to concern for the hound's safety near the highway. In 1998, authorities announced that they may have discovered traces of Kimberly's remains in a gully in rural Elbert County, Colorado, and evidence that her body was buried there after she disappeared. Nothing conclusive was found, however. Kimberly married Michael, who was then 21, in 1993 when she was 15 years old and pregnant with their first child. A photograph of Michael is posted with this case summary. Her family learned after her disappearance that Michael had been arrested twice for domestic violence during their marriage. The couple was living in Phoenix, Arizona in June 1995 when Kimberly told authorities Michael hit her several times while they were riding in a car. She returned to Colorado and obtained a restraining order against him afterwards, but the couple reconciled and moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico. Michael was arrested again for domestic abuse in September 1995. Kimberly told authorities that her husband threatened to kill her if she pressed charges against him. Kimberly told her father that she was leaving her husband on October 27, 1996. She disappeared 2 days later. Michael has denied any involvement in his wife's case and received custody of their 2 daughters after her disappearance. Authorities focused their investigation on an area of farmland along the Arapahoe and Elbert County lines in eastern Colorado in 1998, 2 years after Kimberly disappeared. A farmer believed he located a possible gravesite on his land and saw a maroon truck driving away from the area. Michael owned a similar vehicle at the time. A search of the location produced no evidence, although the farmer said he saw some items, including a perfume bottle, at the site prior to the search. The objects had vanished before investigators arrived. In May 2005, Michael was charged with first-degree murder in the death of his 16-month-old son, Diane Medina. Diane is the child of Michael's second wife, Becky Garrell. They were separated at the time, and Garrell had filed for divorce, claiming her husband abused her. After Michael's arrest, Garrell subsequently testified that, the day before Diane's May 21 death, Michael told her he had murdered Kimberly. He allegedly said he'd beaten her with a bat and buried her alive in a field in East Aurora after he found out she had been unfaithful to him. Michael stated he'd left items at the burial site, including clothing belonging to Kimberly and himself. He threatened to harm himself and Diane if she disclosed this to anyone and would not let her out of his sight until the following day, when Garrell had to keep a scheduled appointment. While Garrell was gone, Michael told her 2 daughters to go to Pizza Hut in Monte Vista with a list of telephone numbers to call and to kiss Diane goodbye because he and Michael would have to go away for a while. Later that day he drowned his son in a sewage treatment facility and left the body there with some toys and shoes lying next to it. He was arrested as he was walking away from the crime scene. Michael pleaded guilty to child abuse and recklessly causing his son's death in July 2006 and was sentenced to 48 years in prison. He maintains that Diane's death was accidental. In October 2011, a grand jury indicted Michael for Kimberly's kidnapping and murder. The indictment remained a secret for the next several months. Authorities stated they hadn't uncovered any new evidence that Michael had murdered his wife, but believed they could prove the charges against him in part because of the passage of time since Kimberly went missing. Michael was convicted of murder in November 2013. There hasn't been any activity within Kimberly's bank accounts or on her social security number since she was last seen. Foul play is suspected in her disappearance due to the circumstances involved.
Number 5.
Fiona Pender has been missing, presumed murdered for so long that the child she was carrying when she last seen alive would now be 20 years old. The hairdresser from Tullamore, Company Awfully, was aged 25 when she vanished. Her case was back in the news in recent days due to the death of her mother, Josephine Pender, who had been ill for some time and this week succumbed to cancer, a protracted end to a hard life. Her daughter and unborn grandchild disappeared on August 23, 1996, from Tullamore. The previous year Fiona's brother Mark had been killed in a motorcycle crash. And in 2000 Josephine's husband and Fiona's and Mark's father Sean died by his own hand. Fiona's disappearance is among a group of similar cases in which young women disappeared, no sign of them or their remains ever emerging. They were grouped together under Operation Trace, a high-profile inquiry established to determine if all or any of the cases was linked in any way. The women are Deirdre Jacob, Annie McCarrick, Jo Dullard, Fiona Sinnott, Fiona Pender, Eva Brennan and Ciara Breen. They are all forever frozen in time in the grainy photos that emerge in the media every once in a while. The accepted narrative is that they all disappeared with no explanation and no clue what had happened to them. The reality is very different. Operation Trace was not established because there were genuine fears the cases were linked. Instead, it arose in response to public concern about the disappearance of so many women in the Leinster area in the 1990s. But in some of the cases, including that of Fiona Pender, the Garda do not see any great mystery. They have a suspect and a motive. But what they have never had are the bodies. And back when these women were vanishing, solving a case without a body and so without any forensic evidence or even cause of death was regarded as impossible. It would not necessarily stop the Garda now. The successful conviction of Graham Dwyer for the murder of Elaine O'Hara despite no cause of death and only partial remains is a case in point. Like the Pender family, the loved ones of Fiona Sinnott from Wexford and Ciara Breen from Louth know the Garda has identified a suspect in their cases. For Josephine Pender, one wonders would it have been easier in her final days, knowing nothing of who killed her daughter? Or did knowing the suspect's name at least give her some comfort Gardaí were onto him and that he might one day be caught? A man known to the Pender family, though not a member of it and who also lived in the Midlands in the 1990s, has always been the chief suspect. Working on the theory that he was the killer, Gardaí have arrested several people. And they have used information supplied by members of the public to search and excavate lands down the years. Every arrest, 5 of them, and every search brought new hope for the family. That hope was at its strongest 2 years ago when the mystery of exactly how she died and where her remains were concealed appeared closer than ever to being solved. Back then, a woman living abroad accused her husband of a range of violent, including sexual, attacks on her. And when she went to the police in the jurisdiction where she had settled with her husband, she linked him to Fiona's disappearance, presumed murder. She told them that when in a rage her husband threatened her and strongly implied he had killed Fiona and that she, his wife, would be next. The woman even pinpointed an exact location in Ireland where she believed the body was buried. However, despite her willingness to come to Ireland to assist in the inquiry, her information came to nothing. She broke up with her husband, and her case against him did not result in a conviction. Josephine Pender was waked in Tullamore on Thursday. She will be buried on Friday morning at a private ceremony in Tullamore. The man Gardaí are convinced killed her daughter still roams free.
Number 6.
Robert departed from his family's residence near Coopersburg, Pennsylvania on June 30, 1979. He was last seen walking down Coopersburg Road towards the town of Coopersburg at 1 p.m. that day. Robert planned to visit his girlfriend's house, which was located approximately 2 miles from his home. He never arrived as expected and has not been heard from again. Robert was not carrying any money at the time of his disappearance. He did not have a history as a runaway, and nothing was amiss in his life at the time to lead investigators to suspect he left of his own accord. He is described as a timid person who trapped muskrats but was afraid to check the traps alone in the wintertime. He was an average student with a good relationship with his family. Robert told his mother before he left their home that he expected to find a ride with someone later in the day. His family members told authorities that Robert often received car rides from friends or walked to his destinations, as he was not a licensed driver at the time he vanished. He did not even have a learner's permit. There is apparently no evidence of foul play in Robert's case, but it is classified as a possible non-family abduction due to the lack of evidence supporting any other theory.
Number 7.
Sullivan and his girlfriend, Camden Sylvia, were last seen jogging during the evening hours of November 7, 1997, in the New York City borough of Manhattan. Sylvia and Sullivan were in the vicinity of Pearl Street and Hanover Square at the time of their disappearances. Neither of them have been heard from again. Sylvia's mother inspected the couple's loft after she failed to locate them shortly afterwards. Everything was in place inside of their residence. Sullivan's wallet, keys, both their passports, and a rental video were on their kitchen table. 2 pairs of running shoes and 1 set of house keys were missing, as was the bag Sylvia carried when she took work home from the office. At first it was thought the couple had taken an impromptu vacation, but their apartment appeared as if Sylvia and Sullivan intended to return home within a short time, and their credit cards have not been used since their disappearances. The couple had been having problems with their landlord, Robert Bob Rodriguez, who owned their apartment building at 76 Pearl Street in Manhattan and had a locksmith shop on the ground floor. Photos of Rodriguez and the residence are posted below this case summary. Authorities believe that Rodriguez was having financial problems and wanted to increase the rent for all of his tenants in his property in late 1997. Sylvia and Sullivan paid only $300 a month for their rent-controlled apartment. It would later command 10 times that amount. Rodriguez apparently threatened to turn off the heat if the renters did not agree to an increase. Sylvia presented Rodriguez with a petition signed by tenants at 76 Pearl Street on the day of their disappearances. The petition stated that the tenants would withhold their rent payments if Rodriguez followed through with his threat. Investigators theorized that Rodriguez believed he could receive his desired rental payments from other prospective clients and murdered Sylvia and Sullivan on November 7. There is no evidence to support this hypothesis, but authorities also believed Rodriguez may have dumped the couple's remains in a body of water in the New York City area afterwards. Extensive searches failed to produce any evidence of the couple's whereabouts. Rodriguez disappeared for 2 weeks afterwards without explanation. He returned to Manhattan by the end of November 1997, hired a lawyer, and refused to cooperate with law enforcement investigating Sullivan and Sylvia's disappearances. Sylvia's mother maintained the rent for the couple's apartment from the time of their disappearances. Rodriguez was arrested on unrelated larceny, tax fraud and credit card fraud charges later in 1997. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 6 years in prison. 76 Pearl Street was sold to another landlord who promptly raised the rent and forced Sylvia's mother to give up the loft. David King was an associate of Rodriguez and was a co-defendant in a lawsuit with the landlord in 1991. He disappeared from New York City during that year around the time he and Rodriguez had an argument. King has never been located, but it is believed he met with foul play. It is not known if Rodriguez is involved in Sylvia, Sullivan or King's disappearances. There have not been any arrests in connection with the cases. Rodriguez was scheduled to be released from prison in the fall of 2002, but the New York State Parole Board reversed its decision in October of that year. The board stated that Rodriguez was evasive about the whereabouts of a gun cache that disappeared from his property in the late 1990s. The board labeled Rodriguez intentionally deceitful, and he was returned to prison for an additional 2 years. He has since been released and maintains his innocence in Sylvia and Sullivan's disappearances. He now lives in the East Harlem neighborhood in New York City. Sullivan was an actor, dancer, choreographer, and art museum director in 1997. Investigators searched the Hudson River for the couple's bodies but turned up no evidence. Their cases remain unsolved.